Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to another edition of the GD Report. I'm G.
And I'm D.
And tonight we're going to be talking about the Lincoln Project. And specifically, we're going to be looking at some of the creative, shall we say, ads that they have out on the airways. But first, let's talk a little bit about what the Lincoln Project is. So, D, you want to fill us in a little bit and tell us what you know about these guys?
Absolutely. First of all, welcome, everyone. Great to see everybody again. The Lincoln Project is based with a group of never Trumpers that pretty much either set out the election in 2016 or were vocally against Trump, but not necessarily for Hillary. And we could have a whole other podcast at some point about that particular strategy. But the highest profile, Stuart Stevens and Rick Wilson as well. But lots of former strategists particularly from obviously the Bush presidencies, the Romney campaigns, the McCain campaigns as well. And these folks have banded together to form the Lincoln Project to really try to highlight some of the things that are happening with Trump and with some of the bad policies that he's passed. Rick Wilson, as I mentioned him, he's probably the highest profile member of this Lincoln Project. He's got a great book out called Everything Trump Touches Turns to Shit. And it's very enjoyable read. But we'll talk a little bit as we go along about some of their strategies, what they're looking to accomplish. They've got some great commercials, probably the most creative group right now that's actually producing commercials. I think that one of the interesting things in this year's election with the pandemic, and then also just with the Trump factor himself, is that presumptive nominee Biden hasn't had to produce a lot of things. He's got some pretty good commercials running right now talking about trust and caring for the American people. But he hasn't had to do a whole lot because Trump's his own wrecking ball in a lot of cases. And so kind of an orange version of the Kool-Aid man busting through the wall everywhere he goes. So the Lincoln Project is really exacerbated a lot of things, and they've gotten Trump's attention in a lot of cases because I think these commercials really get under his skin. Yeah, well, I know he's tweeted about several of the commercials that we're going to see tonight. So that said, let's jump into it. So the first one we're going to see is titled Fox and Friends. And one of the things you're going to see about these videos is that the Lincoln Project, nobody is immune. I mean, they take shots at everybody. So let's take a look at this one. It's about a minute and a half to 2 minutes long. Bear with me just 1 minute.
You want to know how I really feel about the coronavirus, Juan? If I get it, I'll beat it.
I want to tell you the truth about the coronavirus.
This is their next attempt to get Trump.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president.
The fatality rate's just 1%. So who cares if it's 10 times more lethal than the flu?
The national left-wing media playing up fears of the coronavirus.
We're shutting down our country because of the cold virus.
Coronavirus fear-mongering by the deep state.
The flu is showing much more of an impact on Americans than coronavirus. At worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
All the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality.
The coronavirus is the common cold.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing.
There's a lot of people will have this, and it's very mild.
Children are not really affected.
They'll get better very rapidly. They don't even see a doctor. They don't even call a doctor.
I am far more concerned with stepping on a used heroin needle than I am getting the coronavirus.
We can't err on the side of caution anymore. That's the strategy of losers.
It's called the power of positive thinking.
It's a great time to just go out, go to a local restaurant.
Yeah, it's actually the safest time to fly.
This is the best country in the world to get coronavirus.
But maybe that's just me.
You think we're bad for America? You think I'm bad for America? Yeah.
The Lincoln Project is
So what do you think of that one, D?
Every time I see that one, it just makes me shake my head more.
Right.
I've a couple things at play there. The memo at the first is Fox trying to cover their rear ends to cover themselves in case of a lawsuit. We've already seen attorneys start reaching out to people about if their employers expose them unnecessarily to the coronavirus. But I can't help but think when I watch that of the now, unfortunately, 150,000 plus families,
right,
those who passed away from the coronavirus, and how this propagandist arm of right-wing disinformation just continues to mislead folks. It's one thing to have a disagreement about tax policy, or it's one thing to have a disagreement about trade policy, or even about issues like abortion or gay rights or anything like that. You can have policy differences, but to genuinely and legitimately mislead people about a virus that's completely deadly, I think. And the ironic thing to me about the whole thing when it comes to the coronavirus is the fact that the very people who claim to want to get the economy open and the economy moving are the people that have probably done the most to the detriment of that happening. Because if we had responded more openly in March and April of this year and had a stronger shutdown, enforced a mask policy, enforced social distancing, and depoliticized the whole thing, we could be a lot farther ahead than we are now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of blame to go around, and the right-wing media, I think, shares a good portion of that. So the next one is pretty interesting, and we haven't gotten to any Trump ones yet. Excuse me. But the next one takes aim at some other people that the Lincoln Project says is complicit in the rise of Trump. So let's take a look at this one real quick.
I think there's a lot of your friends in this one, G.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Someday soon, the time of Trump will pass. This circus of incompetence, corruption, and cruelty will end. When it does, the men and women in Trump's Republican Party will come to you, telling you they can repair the damage he's done. They'll beg you to forget their votes to exonerate Trump from his crimes, ask you to forgive their silence, their cowardice, and their betrayals as Trump wrecked this nation. Every time they had a choice between America and Trump, they chose Trump. Every time they were called to the service of this nation and their sacred oath, they chose Trump. Every time. Learn their names. Remember their actions. And never, ever trust them again.
Wow, so that's pretty powerful right there.
Right. What do you think of that one?
Well, I think, there's some names there at the end that they kind of scroll through, but the main ones that they're talking about, most of those are pretty vulnerable Republicans. And I think an ad like this, I know that it's playing in the Colorado market right now, and I think it hurts Cory Gardner's chances. So, I can't imagine how, Susan Collins and Joni Ernst are feeling about, their prospects seeing an ad like this out there against them.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting. I don't know what the worst thing about that ad is. The Republicans who enabled Trump or Ted Cruz's beard. But
right.
As a beard man, I guess I can say that. It's interesting to me, and I wondered during the impeachment trial when there were so many Republicans, and most notably Susan Collins, who made the statement that she felt like Donald Trump had learned his lesson and that he wouldn't do anything else. And we all know from watching him that that's not what happened. Or I guess it could be argued he did learn a lesson from the impeachment trial, but the lesson he learned was that he felt fully empowered to do whatever he wanted to do.
Right.
And I think tying that vote to those individuals, especially the senators who are up for, and we already have done a podcast about a lot of those folks, but tying that vote to them and saying, when the coronavirus response is a point of contention and people are concerned about that, these Republicans voted to enable that because they could have removed him.
Yep.
They could have voted to remove him and they chose not to. So very powerful ad.
So the next one, we start to get into the specific Trump targeting. This is called Trumpfeld. It's a play on Seinfeld. So
quick warning to anyone who has an allergy to Cheetos. We're starting the Trump ads.
Right. So let's take a look at this one here.
To the best of my knowledge, we're sitting at the White House.
I must tell you.
No, I'm just telling you. And the Oval Office is right behind me.
Fox News has a new poll out today. Joe Biden leads you by 8 points, 49% to 41.
First of all, I'm not losing.
People trust Biden more to handle the coronavirus by 17 points, on race relations by 21 points.
Those are fake polls.
We still have more than 100 days to this election, but at this point, you're losing.
Not on my watch. It's not going to happen on my watch. I have other polls that put me leading. I have a poll where we're leading in every swing state.
If I may, sir, respectfully, in the Fox poll, they asked people who is more competent, whose mind is sounder.
Yes.
Biden beats you in that.
Let's take a test. Let's go down. Joe and I will take a test. Let him take the same test that I took.
Incidentally, I took the test too when I heard that you passed it. Well, it's not the hardest test.
Nobody's done what I've done.
There's a picture and it says what's that, and it's an elephant.
No. See, that's all misrepresentation. Yes, the first few questions are easy, but I'll bet you couldn't even answer the last 5 questions. I'll bet you couldn't. They get very hard, the last 5 questions.
Well, one of them was count back from 100 by 7.
And let me tell you, you couldn't answer.
All right, what's the question?
Many of the questions. I'd get you the test. I'd like to give it. But I guarantee you that Joe Biden could not answer those questions.
Okay. Don't you believe America deserves a president who doesn't brag he can spot an elephant? The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
That's classic.
Wow. I've seen that one, but I still have to laugh on that.
Yeah, I tell you, Chris Wallace, he's to me, he's the only thing worth watching on Fox News. He learned so much from his dad, the legendary Mike Wallace, and he just, he skewers Trump, and Trump just doesn't even realize it.
Yeah, he's definitely a powerful questioner and led the discussion. Now, we both got some good chuckles out of that one, but I think we all have to remember how serious. If things weren't so serious, it wouldn't be
right.
Wouldn't be nearly as funny, but we wouldn't be able to laugh as much. But I think they hit to the heart of the matter. This guy, he can't answer a straight question.
Right.
He struggles with when he's challenged by, and he always has some secret information that no one else has access to, and he has access to.
Right.
And
I
think that's one of
the generals.
Yeah, and one of the biggest fallacies of the 2016 election is for him to say, and he says a lot, and his followers have clamped onto, the polls were wrong. The polls were wrong. Well, when you actually look at the polls were pretty close to accurate. Right. It's just there were a few states where some votes got, obviously, the votes were off a little bit. I'll say that. We can have a whole other podcast about that topic. But when you look at the fact that Hillary won by 3 million votes in the popular vote, that came out to about what the national polls were looking at as far as the average goes. As we all know, we don't have a national election. But his continued belief that he has information nobody else has, and it harkens back to the whole Nixon's secret plan to beat the North Vietnamese that he'll tell you after he wins. And
right.
And I think this man struggles with basic truth. And so that spot really, really talked to that.
Right. This next one is pretty powerful too. So I'm not going to intro it. It's called How It Starts, and we'll just get into it right here now. So.
This is how it starts. A president out of control as polls forecast his downfall. This is how it starts. In a small city far from the Beltway, shadowy men, no badges, no ID, deputized by a rogue attorney general, snatch so-called enemies of the state off the streets. This is how it starts. Without a warning or a warrant, heavily armed paramilitary units shove their targets into unmarked vans and race away. They fire fire on protesters with gas, flash grenades, and rubber bullets. And when the protesters put their hands in the air, they're assaulted with clubs and fists. This is how it starts. Faceless enforcers say you don't have the right to protest. Now Trump's bureaucrats are promising to send their thugs everywhere. Your town, your neighborhood. This is how it starts and how freedom dies. Unless we stand up, unless we speak out, unless we demand justice. Register and vote November 3rd. Because if we don't, we know how it ends. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content.
Wow. I mean, that, I don't have the words. I mean, that's just amazing.
It's a pretty powerful message, and you and I both have talked about this. What we've seen in the streets of Portland has been scary to anyone that is looking at it from an objective viewpoint. I mean, if you took the reason that the protesters are there in the street, if you took that and you replaced it with a protest for Second Amendment rights or for pro-life political positions, it's just interesting to me that the people who say that they're stockpiling AR-15s and guns in case the government turns tyrannical and starts arresting people on the streets in unmarked cars, where are they now?
Yeah,
I mean,
nowhere.
This is happening right now in our streets. And it's scary that we're seeing our government and our law enforcement agencies being used basically to arrest without cause and detain political enemies of the president. Right. And so it'll be interesting to see as we get into September, October, and if the polls are still where they are, I'm scared for what the next steps will be and what kind of, I don't even know. People say, well, you know, he'll have to declare martial law to do those kinds of things, but it concerns me. I don't know with Bill Barr as the Attorney General if he even would have to do that, or if he would just do whatever he wants to do, because their attitude is they can do whatever. There's no check because they weren't impeached.
Yep. Yeah. So that whole little Senate debacle has just made things worse. So the next ad we're going to look at is a little bit different. It very subtly takes Trump to task, and you know, it's just another evidence of how creative these people can be. So let's take a look. This one's called Fauci.
It was 1988, the AIDS epidemic at its peak. When asked in a debate who he considered American heroes, Vice President Bush praised a young research doctor, Anthony Fauci.
I think of Dr. Fauci. He's a very fine research, top doctor at National Institute of Health, working hard doing something about research on this disease of AIDS.
He's an American hero, a kid from Brooklyn who grew up over his family's pharmacy. At 5'7", he was captain of his high school basketball team, a natural leader. Under 6 presidents, he's quietly worked to keep America safe. In a time when truth is under assault, he's always been straight with us.
So I can say we will see more cases and things will get worse than they are right now.
While President Trump lied.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Now Donald Trump is attacking Dr. Fauci. Why? Because Trump failed America. So he does what he always does, attack and blame.
No, I don't take responsibility at all because...
So who do you trust? Donald, the dope?
Then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute.
Or the doctor? To protect our families, on November 3rd, we can make Donald Trump disappear. It's not a miracle. It's democracy.
What'd you think about that one?
Yeah, pretty powerful. I love the pictures of Fauci in 1988 with the black hair as well.
Right.
Pretty cool. You know, it's funny how history has a way of elevating heroes that in a lot of cases were never known. I mean, you look at things in the Civil War and You look at the Battle of Gettysburg and a college professor from Maine named Joshua Chamberlain. People didn't know.
Right.
And now that name lives in infamy. And you look at different people throughout history that the times call for them to be elevated because of what they've done. And I think Fauci was the person who was ready for this moment. Unfortunately, he's not been listened to by the administration. And to have somebody of his credentials and his knowledge to be attacked in a political way, I think just speaks to I said it earlier, how this should have never been politicized. You know, Trump should have called in former Vice President Biden and Bernie Sanders when he gave his Oval Office address, his first one, and said, this is above politics and it doesn't matter about the election. Right. And you know what's funny is if he would have done those kinds of things and been the leader that we needed during this pandemic, his poll numbers would be a lot higher right now.
We'd probably be looking at a landslide re-election, to be honest with you.
The American people always, during times of crisis, always seek to rally to the president in charge because they want the president to succeed. But whenever the president's attacking the people who are the experts, it becomes really hard for that to happen.
Right. So this next ad we're going to look at is called Trump Stooge, and it's equally powerful. So let's take a quick look here.
Is this Larry or Curly or Shemp?
I think it's both.
Great independent leaders rise from Maine's hard soil. Always have and always will. Take Margaret Chase Smith. When the men in the Senate were terrified of Joseph McCarthy, she called him out. Just like Susan Collins stands up to Donald Trump. Oh, wait. Susan Collins never stands up to Donald Trump. That's why Maine is done with her weakness and excuses. Collins isn't an independent. She's a fraud. Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump controlled her voice. She makes excuses for corruption, for criminality, for cruelty, all while pretending she's worried, concerned, hoping Donald Trump learns a lesson this time. He never does, because she never stands up, never speaks out, never does what a Maine leader should do. Susan Collins doesn't work for Maine, she works for them. And Maine deserves a leader, not a Trump stooge. It's time for Susan Collins to go. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
If I'm Susan Collins, I'm worried.
That's pretty devastating. I mean, I just mentioned Joshua Chamberlain. They showed his picture at the first of that ad. But Mainers are known for an independent streak. They're known for putting Maine and country above party. Right. And I mean, a lot of people forget that the Bush family actually comes from Maine. That H.W.'s dad was actually a senator from Maine. Yeah. So they got the family compound in Kennebunkport, which is a beautiful place to visit. Not that I could afford to live there. Right. But great place to visit. But I mean, Susan Collins, I think that she's just outlived her welcome as far as Mainers go, because she's unfortunately, maybe for her, maybe not, I don't know her, but she's definitely a victim of the times in the standpoint that you're expected to give absolute loyalty and fealty to Trump. And if you don't, you're going to get primaried, or you're going to get. But I think she played her cards all wrong on this, because if she had gotten primaried, I think that could have been her key to getting reelected. If she could have survived, I think she really could have. But you know, the commercial says it all. She continues to say like, "Oh, he'll get better, he'll do better." It's like an alcoholic who always promises to quit and they never do.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about that race on our last podcast, and I think that. As I said, I think the Democrats are in line. We'll see how they follow through. There's still a long time to go before the election, but I think they're in line for a tremendous victory. I think they take back the Senate, they keep the House, and they're going to control Congress. And, hopefully they'll learn from the past and do well, and they'll thrive in that role, and the country will get back on track. At least that's my hope. Speaking of learning from the past, this next one is called Memories. And so let's take a look at that.
These These are the memories COVID took from us. A child's birthday, time spent with friends, a first kiss, or the big day, a homecoming game on a cool fall evening, the first day of college, or a proud graduation. Dreams of starting a business and building a legacy, lifting our hearts in prayer and sharing our faith in God together. The blessing of a peaceful passing of an elderly parent surrounded by family. COVID has robbed America of so much. None of this had to happen. We have suffered needlessly because Trump simply wouldn't listen. Most countries stopped it. Trump refused. It's Trump's virus now, and before it's over, too many more will die. What we've lost reminds us of the stakes this November. It truly is a choice, America or Trump. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this ad.
I think the last line there really kind of sums it up,
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, that's the most powerful ad they've got going. It shows what the country's been through. That picture of him, leaving Marine One disheveled. I think that came after the Tulsa trip, wasn't it?
You did.
Yeah. And he's gotten a little wind back in his sails, but I mean, that was, definitely a setback for him. But I think that ad just shows what the country's gone through because of one person's inaction.
Well, and I think his continued belief that he can just wish this away, like he does when he has extramarital affairs or when he has bad business deals, and he just has a lawyer or a fixer there just to kind of just clean it up and make it go away. He doesn't understand that viruses like this don't react that way. Viruses don't care what state you're in. I remember when Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, said, we're from Texas. We're going to beat this because we're from Texas and we believe in freedom. And the governor of Oklahoma, COVID-19 Bullstead, said, we believe in freedom. And the coronavirus doesn't care what state. It doesn't get to the border from Arkansas and say, oh, well, this is Oklahoma, then I'm going to stop.
Right.
That when people look at, I know you, G-Man, you enjoy traveling and I enjoy traveling. And,
yep.
And when you start looking back at this year and you look at, we've never been through anything like this in our entire lifetimes. And you start thinking about not just the folks who passed away, and some of us know people who have, some of us don't, but you think about all the opportunity cost, all the things. The week that it really hit heavy was March 11th when the Oklahoma City Thunder were playing the Utah Jazz at the Chesapeake Energy Center here in Oklahoma City. And the game was canceled 5 minutes before tip because they had one player test positive. And that's what sparked the whole sports season to be canceled for all sports. I was supposed to be that Thursday. That was a Tuesday, I believe, or a Monday. It was the first part of the week. I was supposed to be that following Thursday. I was supposed to be on a plane to D.C. to go watch the Blackhawks play the Capitals in hockey that Saturday with one of my best friends. And you just start looking at everything that has affected our lives, our economy, everything about it, just our general movement. And all because we didn't have a national plan in action. Doesn't mean that we can't stop the coronavirus. We mentioned that it doesn't care, but not having a leader to step forward and have a national plan, there's been such a vacuum of leadership that I think that's why so many people are yearning for a natural leader. And it's probably the perfect year for Joe Biden to be the candidate.
Yeah, I agree. This next one is called We Will Vote, and I think it's a foreshadowing of what's going to come.
A failed president, the worst economy in U.S. history. More Americans have died in this 4-month period than ever before. Donald Trump's response? Stop the election. He can't win. We voted during the wars. We voted in the Great Depression. We voted when civil unrest swept the country. Americans died for our right to vote. Americans marched for our right to vote. Americans were beaten and brutalized for our right to vote. Now a failed president faces defeat, with millions out of work and tens of thousands dying from his incompetence and neglect, threatening the very foundations of democracy. Donald Trump hears the message. We will vote. We will defend America. We will throw you and your failed cronies out of office. The choice, America or Trump.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this.
You know, one of the things that really has caught my attention during these ads is, so these are a group of Republicans, and, you know, Republicans are known for not being the party of inclusion. They, you know, they don't have a lot of black members. They have very few Latino members. And yet these ads, they span the spectrum of race. And, you know, this ad in particular showing, you know, blacks on the Edmund Pettus Bridge getting attacked by dogs there at the end. I mean,
right.
You know,
I think Stuart Stevens, I mentioned him earlier, he worked on Mitt Romney's campaign. And he, after the 2012 election, where Romney, I remember how confident Romney was, and then President Obama was reelected pretty handily. Stuart Stevens was one of the people who pushed the Republican Party chairman, Reince Priebus, who, by the way, was elected by ousting Michael Steele, African-American chairman of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But he pushed Reince Priebus for the RNC to do a really strong postmortem autopsy about what happened. And they came out with a pretty strong landmark report. It was either 2013 or 2014, basically saying the party's got to change. If we're going to thrive and we're going to grow, we've got to change. And it was a blueprint about reaching out to African Americans, reaching out to the Latino community, reaching out to Asian Americans and different minorities, reaching out to women in a lot of cases. And the sad thing is I think they used it as a roadmap in 2016, but I think it was one of those cases where the roadmap they used it was said, everything that's in this report, let's do the opposite.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
They appealed to people's worst interests when it came to racial divisions. They appealed to people's worst angels when it came for all those things. So I think that, you know, the scary thing to me, besides the ICE officials being in Portland and other major cities arresting people on the streets, is whether we're going to have a vote, whether the vote's going to be delayed. Just this past week, Trump said, you know, he favored possibly delaying the election. I don't know. He didn't say till when. That's always the scary thing when an authoritarian wants to do those kinds of things.
Right.
First of all, he doesn't have the power to do that. That's set in the Constitution about when the election will be. And so, but we've seen that the Supreme Court and the Justice Department that we have now is not really keen on holding up the rule of law. So we'll see, you know, what happens. You see things like Brian Kemp in Georgia and what he's done to limit the number of polling stations in minority areas. The way that when the Supreme Court nullified parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that John Lewis, who just rest his soul, just passed away, fought so hard for, you saw states like Texas start to change and start to really restrict the number of polling places as well and use it. And so already there's restrictions, there's ways that are where people are being challenged at the polling places like never before. There's things like mandatory IDs, the state law in Florida where they changed it where felons got the right back to vote. They changed it by a constitutional amendment that was voted on by the people. And the Republican governor turned around and gave an interpretation saying that that may be the case, but they have to pay all back fines. And so basically instituted a poll tax. And so you see these kind of limitations, and then you wonder, are there going to be armed people in the streets trying to stop people from voting? So it's a scary proposition, and with COVID, all of these things, and I'm going a long way around, I know, I'm doing a lot of talking here, but all of it leads to the need to do what you all do in Colorado, what they do in Oregon, which is a mail-in ballot. It's easy for people to use, easy for people to vote.
Yeah, we love it here. I mean, we get our ballot. We take it out. You can, if there's a candidate you don't know, you can do some research on them real quick on your computer. You make your choice. You put it back in a secure envelope. You have to sign it, of course. And then you can either drop it in the mailbox, or you can do what we do. And we live fairly close to one of the drop-off locations. And the cool thing about Colorado is we've been doing this for so long, and we've perfected it so that there's thousands of drop-off locations around the state, and they're all secure. They're like a mailbox where you would go outside the post office and drop your mail. So you go in, you drop your ballot in there. It's totally secure. Nobody can reach in and grab it or anything like that. And you're confident that your vote is going to get counted. And
how many cases of voter fraud have you had in Colorado?
I don't think we've had very many, if any. What we have had, and I know that officials are trying to figure out a way to combat this, is we have had ballot harvesting. So what happens is the counties will release a list of voters to anybody that wants to go pay the fee that have not yet turned in their ballot. So when I turn my ballot in, I get taken off the list, and all my robocalls stop, and because they know, people know I've already voted. And so what these entities will do is they will go around to people and they'll say, hey, I noticed you haven't voted. I'm happy to take your ballot and turn it in for you if you'll agree to vote for X. And, that way they get their candidate a vote. In some cases, there have been rumors, I don't think anybody's ever proved it, that these entities are actually offering monetary rewards for allowing them to change your ballot like that. But those cases are very, very few. We don't get, you might hear of 20 cases of ballots like that out of the, 5.5 million cast here in Colorado. So.
The biggest case I saw of ballot harvesting was actually in North Carolina, and it was Republican operatives who did it. It's funny that
same type thing.
The people who do the biggest harping about voter fraud tend to be Republicans.
Right. Yeah.
And they're also the ones who tend to get caught. There's actually a member of the House of Representatives in Kansas who's up for re-election right now, and he was just indicted recently for voter fraud because he actually registered his home address as a post office box at a UPS store.
Right.
And so it's going to be interesting. The vote, and we've talked about it the last few podcasts, the vote is the biggest responsibility we have as citizens. And everybody, their main goal ought to be for elections to have a higher turnout, higher participation, higher level, and make it easier for people to vote. And it seems to me that it's predominantly one side that wants to really restrict who gets to vote and how many people vote. So,
well, I think they realize there's a sea change coming, and it's not good for them. We have just a little bit of time left here. We've got a few more ads on our website, and I'll give you that address here in just a little bit. But save the best ad, at least I think, the funniest ad for last. It's a takeoff on the National Geographic shows, and it's called Nationalist Geographic. So let's take a look at that one here.
Behold the rare small-pawed trump, Impetus americanus. Notable for its exotic plumage, the trump is typically a ruddy orange color not found in nature. Though Impetus was once considered an alpha predator, this elderly specimen now weighs somewhat over 300 pounds due to its diet of fast food. In its youth, it was known to pursue females with other predators like molestus Epstein. Now it focuses on exploiting its home territory, the United States. Impetus Americanus is known to be a master of deception and considered the most corrupt of its species. Its tweeted cries of anger are meant to distract its prey from its failures as the leader of its pack. Impetus Americanus is considered endangered this November due to its own incompetence and failure.
Wow.
I just love that.
Impetus Americanus. I don't know. I mentioned earlier that Ted Cruz's beard was the most offensive thing I've seen tonight. I think Donald Trump's dancing in the 80s, or the fact that he's hugging Grimace
Right.
from McDonald's. One of those two things might be more offensive to me than Ted Cruz's beard.
Yeah. I tell you, that ad to me is so hilarious and just so well done. I mean, they should enter that into a contest and win. I don't know what contest you would enter it in, but definitely get my vote. If I was a judge. So
well, and Trump, the people that have written about him and that know him well talk about the fact that he is such a fragile person in his personality, from a standpoint that he really needs to feel masculine. He needs to feel like he really is an alpha male. And all of us know that people who really feel that way are actually very insecure. And so this one probably hits him harder than even the coronavirus commercial about 150,000 people dying, because he doesn't want to be known as somebody who's uncool or non-alpha or anything like that. And I mean, there was a great article in Vanity Fair probably 10, 15 years ago, and it's why he always hated Graydon Carter, the longtime editor of Vanity Fair, was he talked about Trump because he comes from Queens, trying to fit in with the Manhattan crowd and the Manhattan money never liking Trump. They've never liked him, and he's always wanted to fit in that crowd and never has. And so, unfortunately, it feels like he's trying to use the presidency as an experiment for his alpha maleness or lack thereof. And we've all had to bear the brunt of that.
And we're still bearing it. Hopefully, if we follow the message of these ads, that's going to change come November 3rd. So I promised you the web address where you can see these videos on your own. So our website is called thegdreport.com, and you want to go /video. You'll be able to see any of these videos. There's a couple more on there. There's one that's 6 minutes long. We felt that was a bit long to be showing you tonight, but hopefully you've got a taste of what these guys can do. I'm sure as the election gets closer, we're going to see even more ads and more creativity, and so maybe we'll revisit this in another month or so.
Yeah, I think the Lincoln Project's really set the bar high. I hope others get involved, and there's some other creative messages, but they've set the bar high, so it's going to be hard to really compete with them. And I think the freedom they have is the fact that they're all Republicans, and so they don't really have a care in the world whether they piss anybody off.
Yeah.
So they've got that freedom. So again, as always, like to end every one of these by saying, make sure and get registered to vote. Learn your deadlines. Know when those are if you need to get registered for a vote by mail. But make sure you're registered, whether it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, whatever, Green Party, whatever it is, make sure you're registered to vote. It's the one way that we can have an impact. And then seriously think about getting Trump out of office this November. I'm not going to go much stronger than that. It's not hard to watch these videos and understand how I feel, but we all got to do our part this November.
Right. And it's not a Republican or Democratic thing. I think, as you see from these ads, and we know they're by Republicans that have served in other Republican administrations, it's an anti-Trump thing. It's not an anti-Republican thing. So, they recognize that Trump is bad for the country, and now it's time for the rest of us to wake up and do something about it. So anyway, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again here in a few days. And as usual, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.